What's happening in seventh grade? I know it's been a while since you've seen this beautiful face on YouTube, but he's been busy trying to get everything towards the end of the year ready for you, ready to get done. And here we are rolling into the end of May, the beginning of June. It's a beautiful day outside here today. It's a mere maybe 95 degrees. The sun is shining. The avocado tree behind me is growing. And I had a beautiful day on the golf course yesterday. Shot a nice 77 with only three bogeys and one double bogey, but that happens. So I hope you're all well and looking forward to the end of the school year. And I am too, but I miss you guys. And here we go. You have a Chapter 11 test tomorrow in social, or not tomorrow, excuse me, Chapter 11 test, which I postponed till Wednesday. So I would really, really, really suggest paying attention to this YouTube video. It could benefit you in all different ways. I'm going to talk about some of the things that are important for this chapter, and we're going to start off with Christianity. See, because Christianity was not a big part of the Germanic tribal life until Clovis. Clovis, he changed to Christianity. He was the first king of the Franks. He was able to unite all of the Frankish tribes under one ruler, which meant, well, I guess it meant that he was there to be followed. So Clovis, through the heirs to follow, and so Clovis, big part of the Germanic tribal life that moved into Christianity. And it was very hard. It was very odd to understand how Rome was able to retain power in Europe, which was starting to be controlled by the Germanic kings. It was the seat of the Pope that pushed his ultimate power upon Germanic tribes that allowed them to thrive. This showed in the power that the church and popes had. The church and the popes had so much power back then, being that it was Leo III that rewarded Charlemagne by declaring him the emperor of the new Holy Roman Empire. That alone gave the church the power it had sought. See, and today we have a separation of church and state, so government and state can no longer be together. When we think of great treasures found from lore past, we can think of the $400 million of the Royal Merchant ship that was lost around the Civil War time. Many people believe it was in the North Carolina area, but that was on the show Outer Banks. So don't pay attention to that. See, because the Royal Merchant ship was lost somewhere in England, and it did have $400 million dollars in gold on it. And but when we think about real treasures that were found, we got to think about the Staffordshire hoard of awesomeness, as they say, found in Staffordshire, England, which was worth so much more because it had historical value, not only monetary value. You kind of believe that the Anglo-Saxons left that there for people to actually find. So they believed that that it was left on purpose, and the man with his little, Geiger counter, found that, and he made out pretty good, by the way. And maybe one day, perhaps you too will stumble across a hoard of gold. Just remember to give me a call, and I will help you move that gold somewhere. Now, when we start talking about the medieval era, and we look at feudalism, the sound structure of the times when the king sits upon the throne, surrounded by the clergy who were just a little bit beneath him. So important to the confidence of the king, to the confidants, and the noblemen who loved the king, but also loved his money and his land. He looked at the kings who were also protected by the knights, who were no more than vassals, living by the code of chivalry, with chivalry, King Arthur's court, all that stuff, opened the door for women. you know, be a good person basically and do the right thing. And then you had the serfs and the peasants who worked the land for everyone with the hopes of maybe having a little bit left over after they had to give everything away. Um, who could work their land and sometimes maybe make some money off their land. Um, then we got to talk about Eddie, King Eddie, Eddie the First. King Edward the First was also known as Edward Longshanks and the Hammer of the Scots, who assembled lords to command his military forces while strengthening the crown and parliament. That's what Eddie was famous for. He was taking his armies into Wales, unsuccessfully, I will say, and he destroyed the autonomy uh, of that whole idea while creating a legal reform within the whole monarchy. Um, and while we talk about the strength of the church and look at the different things that the church had going on, we got to look at Pope Urban and his decree to regain that holy land, uh, the holy city, which was occupied by the Muslims. He gathered peasants and serfs along with crusaders and knights in order to stop the spread of Islam. Seems like they trounced down through the territories and looking for ways to regain, and hence the first crusade begins, and followed by several other crusades, including the coming to age of Richard the Lionheart in the third crusade. So here we are, and don't forget that on the way down to the Holy Land, we stopped by and took care of some Jewish because they believed that they were the reason Christ had died. So the whole era of the medieval times was crazy. It was very crazy. And then as we move forward from there, you can't forget about the conflicts between Henry the Fourth and Pope Gregory the Seventh, which concerned the fight over power. It's always about power. It's about power today. A pope, he's the head of the church, and the king, all fighting over who could appoint religious leaders and bishops. And kind of crazy when you think about that. The kings believed it was their right to pick the bishops. The pope said no, this has to do with a religious thing, and in turn, a fight between kings and clergies pursued and continued on throughout the Middle Ages. Go figure. Here we have kings and religious fighting over certain things, which not very religious like, is it? Uh, Lastly, let's take a look at the fall of feudalism. What was the cause of the fall of feudalism? When you can say it was due to the Crusades. You could say that it was due to mercenaries being paid. So one of the biggest things that caused the fall of feudalism was the wage-paying jobs that sprouted new towns throughout the area, which was credited by the new trade options in Europe. So you build towns, you got new trade options, and you have jobs. So the threat of mercenaries led to employment of professional standing armies, leading after this came the Renaissance era. So, wage paying jobs created towns, created more trade, and therefore the fall of the medieval era. Um, right, quite interesting. And then as history moves further and further, we get into the Great Charter. Do you know what the Great Charter is? The Great Charter is the Magna Carta, Magna Great Carta Charter, that documented and curtailed the king's monarchical rule over his land or over the land, and the sudden rise of Parliament, forcing kings to follow rule of law. Uh, all due to King John being told what to do. He was tied down, forced by the noblemen to listen to the people. If only we could do that today with our government, tie him down and tell him this is what we want. But unfortunately, you would end up in jail. Uh, so the whole idea of the Magna Carta was to understand and believe in the power of the people, because here in America we are by the people, for the people. Okay, so he agreed. King John had to agree to these rights, and hence the Magna Carta took over. Parliament became big, and I believe if you were tied down as well, you would probably agree to whatever they said, considering that there was a threat on his life. When we go further talking about Pope Urban, uh, in his feud with the Muslims during the Crusades, it moved on to Spain. Not that the whole idea of Christianity and Muslim and Islam went to Spain during the Reconquista, which was a period marked by reconquest of Christian values and territories that had been seized by the Muslims in Spain. Um, the idea was to expel the Moors from the peninsula, ending Muslim rule in that region, and it was kind of gruesome and crazy, and many people died. And here again, we have Christianity fighting Islam over land, and it seems like religion caused a lot of problems back then, and it's sad that we can't all just get along with what is the idea of honoring each other. Um, not out of this war, but along comes the 100 Year War, which was a series of conflicts between uh, rulers of England and the French, in the House of Valors over the right to rule the Kingdom of France. And that's kind of makes me laugh a little bit, because you got France and then you got England, and you have the King of England believing he should have been the guy who was ruling France. It just doesn't seem crazy. That'd be like saying, I'm the manager of Walmart and I have the right to manage Stater Brothers as well. I don't know if that's a great analogy, but yeah, it's a good one. Um, when you're talking about things in the 100 Year War, it actually lasted 116 years, and the two factors, you know, decided that this fighting, and it's eventually led to the King of France taking over and England staying there. And then we have to talk about the bubonic plague. The bubonic plague, and that's kind of ironic, considering that here we are in this time of coronavirus, and in the bubonic plague, during the bubonic plague, 1/3 of the population of Europe was killed off, and that was in the 1300s. And this plague was caused by the bacterium Yersinia pestis. When you are exposed to this bacterium, you would, within 1 to 7 days, you would feel the symptoms of, fever, etc. And it kind of like when you would die, and it was airborne and passed on by, if you can guess it, I'm sure you do. It was passed on by fleas who were on the rats, and then the fleas would jump on you. And so, matter of fact, it was considered the first act of germ warfare, um, wherein I believe it was the Chinese were catapulting dead bodies who were infected with the plague onto docks of other countries or cities that they were going to attack, and kind of like putting the plague into these people. So that's kind of funny that it would be considered germ warfare. The plague was caused by fleas infected by small animals such as rats, and this was considered the Black Death. Now, if you were to really, really listen to this, it would benefit you tremendously. So, this will be your last one for the school year, and I will continue putting YouTube videos up over the summer. Kind of like starting for our 8th grade year, we'll get a little jump on it. Um, that way we can scoot right into chapter 3 and start talking about the colonization of America. Uh, You guys work hard. We've got about a week left here of putting up work. I will not be putting any more social days after the test. And you guys stay safe, stay happy, love your family, love God. Peace out, people. God bless you.